Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today it's April 7th, 2021, the 25th of Nisan. We are in the Torah reading of Shemini, reading the book of Leviticus. They say a story about a fellow, a legend of his own. His name was Hershela Astropola, very intriguing individual, who once came to a town famished. After such a long journey and such a long trip, he was looking for something to eat, a lunch where he can get. And everybody directed him to the wealthiest guy in town. But they warned him, coming to this wealthiest guy in town doesn't mean you're getting a good meal, because he is a miser that you can never imagine. But Herschel is going to try his luck to get himself a meal, as he's starving as it may be. Comes into the fellow's house, and the miser welcomes him. He says, I actually come from the city where this rich man is from Warsaw, and I'm here to visit. So the owner of the home, the wealthy fellow, says, you're from Warsaw, my hometown. Please come inside, have some dinner with me. And a beautiful spread with bread, soups, fish, meat, all the wonderful things. So Herschel is about to take the soup, to put a spoon inside, and all of a sudden the wealthy man, while he's eating, he says, no, so how's it going in Warsaw? How's my good old teacher doing? He says, Herschel says, he died. He says, and what about the rabbi? He died. And what about the chazan? He also died. And what about the banker? He also died. The wealthy man doesn't understand what's going on. He asks Herschel, was there a pandemic that all of a sudden so many people died that I don't hear of it, that I never heard of, that all of a sudden they're dying in Warsaw? So Herschel looks at the man and he says, listen here, when I'm eating, everything is dead. Everything else is dead when I'm eating. This week's Torah reading tells us about the laws pertaining kosher food. What is kosher, what is not kosher. The signs of a kosher animal is that it has chews its cuds and it has split hooves. The signs of a kosher fish is that it has fins and scales. And then it tells us what the kosher birds are and what the non-kosher types of creatures are, and so on. Interestingly to note that out of all the animals that the Torah mentions that are kosher, only 10 of them are kosher. Any animal that is not considered kosher either has only one of the signs or doesn't have any of the signs at all. But the Torah uses an interesting terminology. The Torah doesn't use the terminology kosher or non-kosher. The Torah says pure or impure. What makes a dog impure just because it doesn't chew its cuds and still have split hooves? What makes a cat impure just because it doesn't chew its cuds and have split hooves? And by contrast, what makes a sheep or cattle or goat pure because it chews its cud and has split hooves? Why does the defining concept of what an animal is, pure or impure, by a character which seemingly is the innate nature of the animal? Why does that define its purity or impurity? And why is it in general that the Torah tells us about these laws of kosher in the book of Leviticus, where the book of Leviticus, as we're going to read, tells us about the laws of purity and impurity, the laws of the sacrifices in the Holy Temple, seemingly things which are greater and holier than just mundane type of way animals live? To take it even a step further, since when is the Torah a book of health? The Torah doesn't tell us which vegetables we should or should not eat, which are dangerous and which are not dangerous. The Torah just tells us as a rule, a person has to protect his life, take care of his life, behave accordingly. Why then does the Torah over here all of a sudden go into detail of telling us what is considered a kosher animal, not a kosher animal, why it's pure, impure? Is it because of health reasons? We know that's not the reason. Because you can have very unhealthy eating habits of a kosher animal and very healthy eating habits of a non-kosher animal. So where do we have, what is the reason? What is the behind the scenes, so to speak? What was God thinking when he chose these animals yes and these animals not? And why does he term it as pure and impure instead of kosher and non-kosher? There are many that try to answer the concept of the animals that God chose. We know, first of all, this is one of the mitzvot, one of the commandments that God says this is the way it is, and too bad. Others and modern thinkers tried to say it was health reasons, but we see it's absolutely not, as we mentioned. The Abarbanel gives a reason, and he says, if you look at the animals that God chose, which are kosher or not kosher, it is because of their character of the animals. The animals that chew its cud and have split hooves, they are not aggressive animals by nature. They're not birds of prey or animals of prey. They eat grass and they eat other things as well, but they don't attack other animals. And by contrast to those that are not kosher, attack other animals as well. And therefore, we want to eat something which is a character trait of a good thing. So therefore, when we ingest something, we should ingest something of a good character trait. An interesting side tidbit, we know that even many animals and livestock was even prohibited before Noah's Ark. People only ate vegetarian, and they were only vegetation. The very fact that God comes along and says, this is the animal that you could eat, means that I would understand, otherwise I would not be allowed to eat it, and the Torah tells me I'm allowed to. But here is what we find, the unique concept of what God is telling us with the laws of kosher. In the world, there are 4 categories of things. There's inanimate, vegetation, animals, and people. Each one on the lower level than the next. But here's the interesting part of it. Each one depends on the level below it. For example, earth, rocks don't depend on anything. God created, they stay the way they are. They don't need any livelihood toward it. They don't need any life force behind it, so to speak, to get moving. It doesn't move. It doesn't go anywhere. It just stays there. By contrast, vegetation, it can only grow if it has soil. It can only become and produce if there is soil. Animals, which is a step higher, can only survive if they have vegetation. Humans need animals, vegetation, and soil. So we see that greater the thing, the more dependent it is on the lower item. Why is that? Because God created a system in the universe that everything that we have in this world should be able to be uplifted to the next level. So soil is uplifted to the next level through vegetation. Vegetation is uplifted through animals, and the humans have the power to uplift all of them. That means by their innate nature, the way God created them, they have the power to uplift, and they are there to be cultivated and uplifted. So let's go back to our Torah reading. Now let's go back to the laws of kosher. When God made the animals in a unique, distinct way, the very fact that this animal is a non-aggressive animal, the very fact that it has split hooves makes it non-aggressive. Or the fact that it chews its cud is because it eats the grass and it needs to re-chew what it ate to be able to get the full nutrients out of it. It is because God is telling us that there's something innate within this unique animal, A, that needs to be uplifted, B, that needs to be ingested, and C, that through the both of them, we, the human being, and the animal both bring it to its completion. So by a person eating a kosher animal, they now become, A, they're uplifting the animal and all the elements that are below it. And the very fact that God made this animal in its core essence, in its nature, just by the way it was created, that this is considered a kosher animal and this not, gives us the ability to uplift it. That means the quality of the food, the quality of the animal, the charisma of the animal is what makes it palatable and available for us to uplift. But let's take it even a step further. The mystics explain to us, what does it mean pure and impure? That God created, the word kosher means fit. The word pure and impure, what God is saying is that there's not everything in this world can you uplift. Not everything in this world can you make holy. Not everything in this world is pure. Over here, God comes along and sets the guidelines and says, these things are pure and impure. Who decides what's pure and impure? Only God can determine what's pure and impure. And therefore, only God can say, I'm not giving you the laws of kosher for digestive reasons, for health reasons. It's because it's a matter of purity. That when you eat a kosher animal and when you make a blessing on a kosher food, you yourself become pure by eating that animal, by eating that vegetation, by eating whatever it may be. You are what you eat. You become a pure person by keeping those kosher laws and by following what the Torah tells us is considered pure. And by contrast, God forbid, if we eat something impure, we are ingesting impurity. We're making ourselves impure. And therefore, the Torah gives us these two symbols of the kosher animal. The kosher animal has split hooves. What is split hooves? There's one foot going in each direction. Things look great in both ways. You'll say, what's the difference, this side or that side? Purity and impurity, big deal. Therefore, the Torah says, no, we have to understand and realize what there is in this world, the contrast between the two things, that there's a right and wrong, there's a purity and impurity. And we need to make sure to choose the purity. And at times, the impurity looks so dressed up, it looks in the same direction, it looks like it's going the same way. And you may say there's almost no difference. They look exactly the same. They'll give you the same health benefit, maybe even better. Therefore, the second symbol is chew its cuds. Before you make a decision, before you decide which road to take, regurgitate it. Think about it. Is this the right thing I'm doing? Is this purposeful? Will I gain something? Is this going to make me holier, purer, or the opposite? The two signs of the kosher animal are not only signs of the animal, they're also signs of us as human beings. For every facet in our life, to recognize that in everything in life, there's a pure way and an impure way. There's two directions we can take. And before we convince ourselves which direction is right or wrong, think about it once, think about it twice, to be assured that you're taking the right path. Let us learn more about the kosher laws. Let us understand that the kosher laws are not just about a health diet, but they are what we eat. We become different by virtue of what we eat. When we eat pure, we become pure. It's a dramatic life change. Let us try it. If you have any questions about it, feel free to contact me. We can discuss it further. But thank you very much for joining us today. And hopefully we will take these lessons, bring them to life, and become better, purer, holier, and more fit because of it. Looking forward to joining you again tomorrow. Lunch break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m. God bless you and have a wonderful day.